The Aboriginal Australians and Torres Strait Islanders, who were the original human inhabitants of Australia and its satellite islands, were not hunter-gatherers, as commonly believed, but were in fact sedentary agriculturalists with sophisticated engineering, aquaculture, architectural, and botanical knowledge. This video is the first in a series describing the academic background to dark emu, its initial reception and rise to fame, the controversy over its accuracy, and its current reception in the scholarly community. This video covers these topics. 1. Dark emu's scholarly predecessors. 2. Dark emu's initial reception. 3. Dark emu's rise to fame. Use the timestamps in the video description to navigate the content. Dark emu's scholarly predecessors. In 2010, Australian historian Rupert Gerritsen published Australia and the Origins of Agriculture. It was a scholarly and well-researched academic text providing new insight into the earliest history of Aboriginal land management in Australia. Its central claim was that Aboriginal land management practices could legitimately be classified as agriculture in at least 2 regions. This was not a completely groundbreaking conclusion, having been debated for many years by earlier scholars. In fact, this was noted by archaeologist Harry Lurandos, who reviewed Gerritsen's work, commenting, quote, "A good deal of this material, though by no means all, has appeared before," end quote. Additionally, Lurandos expressed some concern that this earlier scholarly work was used by Gerritsen with few acknowledgements, and wrote that he was, quote, "puzzled why reference to the researchers who had generated this or similar information was either very minimal or non-existent," end quote. Archaeologist Ian Gilligan, in his own review of Gerritsen's work, concluded that although it had merit, quote, "each of Gerritsen's 3 cases of indigenous agriculture in Australia is problematical, however," end quote. However, Gerritsen's work was peer-reviewed and received a generally warm response, although with some important caveats and pushback. This paved the way for further work in this field. In 2011, Australian historian Bill Gammage published The Biggest Estate on Earth: How Aborigines Made Australia. This was a popular book for a non-scholarly audience. It took Gerritsen's argument and enlarged it, making even more claims, but providing less evidence for them. This received a very enthusiastic response among the general public, but a more lukewarm response from academics, a number of whom expressed their concerns about Gammage extending his argument beyond the evidence, or described his claims as possibilities rather than demonstrable facts. This was particularly the case for his claims that early European settlers recorded their observations of grasslands and forests which had been carefully cultivated, shaped, and landscaped by Aboriginal Australians in a manner which looked almost identical to English parks and gardens. In her review of Gammage's work, ecosystems research scientist Sue McIntyre observed that Gammage occasionally seemed to use rhetoric to fill in the gaps where evidence should be, writing, quote, "The problem for me is not so much subjectivity, but the beguiling language that so lyrically and confidently fills in details of action and intent around the quoted evidence," end quote. Similarly, ecologist Roderick Fensham's review observed that although Gammage quoted many European settlers describing the Australian landscape as having been well cultivated in ways that resembled, for example, quote, "an Englishman's park," end quote, there was no clear concept of what settlers actually meant by this, or objective records of what they actually saw. Fensham explained, quote, "What was regarded as a forest back then might not be the forest in our mind's eye today. The historical lexicon needs to be carefully circumscribed, otherwise an evolving language might render the illusion of a landscape transformed," end quote. In response to Gammage's claim that Aboriginal land management practices had maintained what Gammage views as a balance in the environment, anthropologist Timothy Neal observed, quote, "Gammage ignores a large body of recent scholarship in which, to paraphrase K. Milton, balance may not be the ends or ideal of indigenous methods. It may be an incidental consequence of other activities and factors," end quote. In other words, when a human society's interaction with their physical environment stops short of disrupting the ecology significantly, this is not necessarily due to intentional strategies aimed at ecological care. It may be that the society is, in fact, unconscious of the long term or even short term effect of their use of the environment, but that such use is of so small an impact that it simply doesn't change the environment very much. This can give the appearance of the society deliberately maintaining a harmony with their environment or practicing careful management strategies, when in fact they had no such intention. The entire question of whether a society is intentionally maintaining some kind of ecological balance is fraught with definitional challenges. If a group of people gathers food resources from plants in a particular area until the plants are unable to provide any more food, and then the group moves to a new area to gather food from the plants there, is this behavior in harmony with the environment or maintaining some kind of ecological balance? If the group returns to the original area some months later, when the plants have regrown, and gathers food resources from them again until they are once more depleted, and the group moves on as before, is this behavior intentionally in harmony with the environment? Could this be described as maintaining some kind of ecological balance? These are questions with which archaeologists and anthropologists grapple. Dark emu's initial reception. In 2014, Australian schoolteacher Bruce Pascoe published Dark Emu, Black Seeds, Agriculture or Accident. This was a popular book for a non-scholarly audience. It took Gamage's argument and enlarged it, making even more claims and providing a range of sources in support of them. Like Gamage's book, this received a highly enthusiastic response from the general public. However, unlike Gamage's book, it received almost no response from relevant mainstream scholarship, and the few responses it did receive expressed some concern at the way Pascoe interpreted his sources and represented his evidence. One review criticized Pascoe's reliance on secondary rather than primary sources and his, quote, over-reliance on the work of the late Rupert Gerritsen, end quote. Dark Emu's rise to fame. According to Australian lawyer Russell Marks, Dark Emu only gained significant attention in May 2016, around 2 years after publication, when it was awarded both the Book of the Year and Indigenous Writers Prize by the New South Wales Premier's Literary Awards, a prestigious event on the literary calendar recognising the excellence of Australian writers. At this point, Dark Emu's reputation began to rise, and over the next couple of years, it received a consistent stream of praise from a wide range of commentators and a number of accolades, of which the following is only a brief sample. In 2016, the book was reviewed very favourably by Chris Johansson of the Australian Greens political party, who referred to it as, quote, excellently written, thoroughly researched and referenced, end quote. In 2017, Dr. Stan Florek, collection officer at the Australian Museum, showcased Dark Emu in the museum's book club, calling it, quote, an excellent book, end quote, which was, quote, packed with quotes and references from original sources that collectively challenged the narrative of the Aboriginal people as nomadic hunters, end quote. Also in 2017, the Australian Institute of Landscape Architects published a lengthy extract from Dark Emu on its website, with an introduction describing the book as revealing, quote, a long history of Indigenous agriculture, a history that predates the pyramids, but which was omitted from the history books, end quote. In 2018, Indigenous contemporary dance company Bangara presented an adaptation of Dark Emu in dance. Also in 2018, Australian historian Tony Hughes-Daith endorsed Dark Emu, saying author Bruce Pascoe, quote, assembles a persuasive case that Indigenous Australians farmed their land, lived in villages, built houses, harvested cereals, built complex aquaculture systems, end quote. In the same year, a new edition of Dark Emu was published, though this was a reissuing of the original book rather than a revision or update. However, the bibliography differed slightly from the original. In the first edition, Pascoe's list of sources included citations of free online electronic copies of certain works he cited, whereas in the new edition, these sources were cited as printed books rather than as online sources. In 2019, Dark Emu was chosen for Australia's Parliamentary Book Club by popular vote. In 2020, Pascoe published a new book, Young Dark Emu, A Truer History, aimed at providing the original book's contents to a younger readership, particularly for use in schools, though the original version was already being used by teachers in Australian schools, and special teachers' notes had been written specifically to help teach it in the classroom. In the same year, Pascoe was granted the position of Enterprise Professor in Indigenous Agriculture at the University of Melbourne. Although it had yet to make an impact on academia, Dark Emu seemed to have a bright future in both popular history and Australia's education system. However, troubling clouds had already started to form around the book, and an incoming storm was soon visible on the horizon.